17 people, 3 families, a big trip to Ghana. How do you save to make this trip happen? You only have a few months to do this. I'll tell you exactly how we saved money to make this trip to Ghana happen. Hey, what's going on? This is Maoli Vodi with financiallypresent.com, your one-stop shop for financial and investment education. And if you're planning on a big international trip, this video is for you. I'm going to take you along the financial ride of how we were able to plan a trip of this magnitude. And for some background, my family is Ghanaian, so I have some connections in a sense with family that's there, and my parents have set up some things, but ultimately we still had to pay a lot of regular average costs to make this trip happen. And with my sisters and their families, we're talking about 17 people, kids included, being able to make this trip happen. So for my household specifically, it's me, my wife, and my 2 kids. And in order to save, we had to make some adjustments, and I'll break down exactly how we were able to make that happen, and hopefully it'll help you with your next big trip. So I'm gonna cover what we thought we would spend, how much we actually spend, and then how we got to saving that exact amount or enough to be ready to go on this trip. First things first, we knew that airfare was gonna be a big cost, so we had to start planning for that first. And again, planning was not something we just thought of a few months before. This trip, we've been trying to make it happen at least for a couple of years, but the official planning of it probably started about 14 months ago. Okay, so 14 months to the actual trip date is where we started actually saving and putting some money aside. All right, and I'll give you a timeline of how the savings accumulated or changed all the way leading up to the trip. We knew first and foremost, airfare was gonna be a big issue or a big cost. Then we also knew that lodging had to be covered, and then transportation. So those were kind of the big 3. So those helped us frame most of what our budget was. So as far as our budget, this is what we thought it would be. Let's take a look. So according to our estimates, we figured flights would cost about $10,000, $1,000 for shots, $2,000 for apartment rental, $2,000 for food and groceries, about $1,000 for excursions, and then $1,500 for just any unplanned expenses or things that we weren't sure of. Okay, now that you see what we budgeted or thought it would be, that came out to about $17,500. So we knew that had to be the goal, and we would need to move closely to that between this 14-month period. So you had to figure, how are we going to do that? Next, I'm going to show you exactly how much we actually spent. The actual costs were $6,500 for flights, $1,800 for shots, immunizations, and appointments, $1,300 for an apartment rental for 2 weeks and utilities included, like electricity, $540 for the visa application and the documents and sending them back and forth, $560 for a driver and a van rental for up to 2 weeks, and gas, and that was split 3 ways. Restaurant, food, groceries, that was about $500. $628 for excursions, souvenirs, clothing. So we got some tailored outfits that we really enjoy. And lastly, for about incidentals, $500. And that total comes out to $12,328. Thankfully for us, it wasn't exactly what we budgeted for, but we were prepared, okay? We knew flights, again, were gonna be the biggest cost, and we were able to drop that cost significantly by picking just a different itinerary, because we have a airport 10 minutes from us, and a direct flight from there would have been $2,600 per person. But instead, we opted to go to an airport that's maybe 20, 30 minutes away from us, have a layover, about an hour-and-a-half flight away, and then fly directly. So basically from JFK to Accra, we were able to fly direct. And instead of it being about $2,500 a person, it was $1,600 a person. So that dropped down our budget significantly. So it really helped our actuals. Then for the apartment rental, we were able to speak directly with the apartment owner or the property manager, and that really helped, because when you explain that you have 3 households, that you're bringing, then there's potentially some wiggle room or some adjustments that can be made. So if you want to be able to find a place to stay in Accra, you'll see a link for Golden Admiral properties below this video. So that can definitely help. For immunizations, this is something I admit, I thought, oh, we'd be fine. It's not going to cost that much, or I just forgot how much it actually adds up to. But we had enough buffer in our budget to be able to handle this. But that came up to about $1,800, and that was still with at least one of the four of us not even having to take their yellow fever shots because it still was valid from the previous visit. And the rest of the budget seemed to flow relatively well. Food didn't cost as much as we had planned. We didn't go out to eat at restaurants as much. We had someone cook for us, and then we were hosted by friends and family. So that really helped. And then things like souvenirs, groceries, and things like that, they kind of went on par, and there are some places where you can even go cheaper than what we did. So ultimately, we were still able to stay under budget, mainly because of the flights being significantly lower. And we were subject to the time of the year that we went. We had to go in the summer. That's just how it works for us. We have teachers amongst us and students, so we couldn't make another time of the year work. It is cheaper if you go at a different time, but summers, it's just expensive. So that's how much we actually spent. Let me explain and break down how we got to this amount. So as I mentioned before, we started really saving for this trip about 14 months before the trip actually started. And between that time and the trip actually occurring, there were a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of family Zoom calls, just coordinating the three households, and it helped things work out very well. We check in on each other and say, hey, did you start doing this process? Yes. Did you do your visa application? Things like that. So that kicked off a lot of the savings of 14 months ago. And it was something that was kind of stable, but not as aggressive. And then we reevaluated that about 9 months before the trip. And we looked at it and said, hey, now we actually need to shift gears. So what we did was every Friday, we made sure $125 was being deposited directly into a separate savings account that was created for this vacation. All right, and then when the vacation's over, we'll plan to use this account for another trip or another purpose, basically. All right, so, and then after that adjustment to the savings, 6 months before the trip occurred, we looked at it and said, hey, we have this amount. We're believing that it's gonna cost about $17,500, and we know that the flights have to be paid for first. This is where we had to shift gears, because honestly, the flight estimation can only be accurate within about 6 months of the trip. And as you know, 14 months before the trip, you can't really book the flight. So we really knew what the flights would cost about 6 months before the trip. And that's where we were able to get more of an accurate gauge of the costs. And that's where we said, hey, well, in addition to the $125 per week or $500 a month that are going towards the savings account for this trip, I did something that I wasn't a fan of, but in hindsight, I completely have no problem doing it again if I have to. I have zero regrets. I reduced what I was putting into my retirement to increase the savings for this trip. And what helped me get to that? Well, I've been investing in the market long-term for over 14 years, and that's what's allowed my investments to grow. And I knew that if I slightly lifted the pressure off the accelerator, I'd still be okay. So I'm not putting the brakes on investing. I never said anything like that. All I did was relieve some pressure off of the accelerator. So I still regularly invested through this period, but essentially what I did was $500 per paycheck. So an additional $1,000 per month, in addition to the $500 that's being saved. So we're looking at between 6 months to the trip, and when the trip occurred, we started aggressively saving $1,500 a month towards the trip. And this is what really sent the savings or shifted into overdrive, basically. And it really helped us make sure that we were actually comfortable with what we spent when we got when we got to the trip or when we started our vacation. We just knew that there was no stress related to swiping for this, or, the money was set aside. And I'll tell you that reducing those retirement savings for the 6 months, in retrospect, have no bearing on what's going to happen in retirement. It's not going to make that big of a difference for me, only because I have time that's compounding on itself. So 14 years of investing was not wiped out by reducing 6 months of contributions. And again, I'm still contributing. So these are the type of things that you might have to do when it comes to taking a big trip to make sure that you avoid using debt to fund these trips. And I knew for me, I did not want to go into debt for this big trip. It would be an added level of stress that I knew I didn't need. So my question to you is this: do you have a strategy in place when you're planning a trip like this? Would you feel comfortable if you had to reduce some of your retirement contributions in order to make this trip happen? Are you actively contributing to retirement? These are the type of questions you have to regularly ask yourself when it comes to these type of expenses. For me, again, I have no regrets with how I paid for the trip. I feel like it was an experience of a lifetime to be able to see my kids see and witness where my parents grew up. And we traveled 5,000 miles from where we regularly live. And it was a beautiful experience. If you want to see more of that trip and what we actually did on it, check out some of the other videos in this series about our trip to Ghana. If you like this video, I want you to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new to the page, and turn on notifications so that you don't miss out on future content. And until next time, stay present.